Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how I made this traditional English shave horse with a few modifications that I think really make it more versatile and more comfortable to use. As I said, it's a traditional English style shave horse, but there's three main things that I altered. So one, there's several different holes so you can adjust the treadle forward and back. And then there's holes here at the top and the bottom so that you can adjust the height of the clamp pin and the foot pin. So you can change the geometry depending on your size or the size of the workpiece. I added a seat back, which makes it much more comfortable. It gives you something to push against as you're pushing on it. And the seat back actually just adjusts really easily forward and back. So depending on how tall you are, it's really easy to move this around. And the last thing I added is here at the front, you can actually quickly release this and raise and lower it and lock it in, depending if you want to raise the back so that you have a different angle to work at. I made the whole thing out of a single 8-foot 2x10 piece of maple and a little bit extra for the seat back. The whole thing comes apart really easily so you can flat pack it and store it really small. I'll include dimensions as I make it in the video, but I also made some downloadable diagrams that I'll link that include cutout layouts and things so that you can see exactly how to make each piece. So now I'm just going to jump right in and show you how I made it. And if you enjoyed the video, a like and a subscribe really help the channel and it's much appreciated. So I've got this piece of 8/4 maple. True dimensions are 8 foot 3 inches long. It's about 10 1/4 wide and it's 2 inches thick. I've drawn out a design and I should be able to get all the pieces out of this one board. So I'll start with the layout right now. And none of these dimensions need to be dead on because the joinery is pretty simple, so I'll just be marking this out with a pencil. I'm going to skip showing the measuring to save time, but here's the layout, which you can also download on my website via the link in the description. But if you'd find it helpful to watch me measure and mark out all the pieces on the board, there's a short video of that I'll link in the description also. I'll bring the foot pin and the clamp pin over to the table saw because I'll need to lathe these down into cylinders, and right now they're wider than they are tall, so it would just be a waste of time to lathe that out. So what I'll do is just slide the fence over so it's loosely holding that piece, clamp it down, and then I can go ahead and run this through, and then that'll square that up so it's just less time at the lathe. So now I've got all the parts rough cut out and then I've separated them into groups. These 5 pieces are the 3 legs, the clamp pin and the foot pin, and they all need to be lathed. This is the main seat, the base platform that actually clamps the wood, the 2 side treadle bits, and the mount that goes with the clamp. These all just need to be planed and squared off. This is the quoin that needs to be assembled, and then a pile of just scraps that I can build little wedges and things that I'll need along the way. So I'm just going to start working on these. I'll get those lathed, get these planed, and get the quoin assembled. I need to get the quoin glued up, so I'll start with this just to get the glue setting. The 3 pieces will just glue together like this, so I just need to plane the 6 outside faces and get it glued together. So I'll just throw it in the vise. And with the number 4 plane, I'm just going to hit the 6 main sides. Okay, and so the 2 outside ones just sandwich the middle block. The middle block sticks out maybe 1 inch in the back, and I'll just check that these 2 are pretty good and just clamp that up. All right, so I'll just sit this aside and get to work on the rest. Next, I'll get these parts planed and squared up. This is the main bench, the 2 sides of the treadle, the main working plank, and the mount that attaches to the plank. So first I'll just throw this main bench in the bench dogs. I'll use a number 7 because this is a nice long piece. And I'll just pause here to show you real quickly why a long number 7 plane is so ideal for planing big boards. You can see it's nice and smooth here, and it's nice and smooth back here, but the blade didn't actually even touch anything in here really. It's because the board dips, and the long plane can span that distance. So I know that the board's going down here, and I'm going to need to hit here and here even more to come down to this side. Otherwise I'm going to end up with a board that has big waves in it. All right, finished with this one, and that is a good workout. I'm going to collect the shavings because these are great to start fires with, and then I'll knock out these with a low angle jack plane. Next, I'm going to use a spoke shave and a draw knife just to knock down the corners. On these, I'm barely going to take anything off. It's just to knock off the edge before I give it a final sanding. But on the bench, especially where the back of the leg will be, I'm really going to round that over so it's much more comfortable. So I'll usually take one pass at a 45-degree angle, and then I'll take one pass on each side of that, 22.5 degrees, just to soften that up, and then that's ready for sanding. So those four are done, and I'll start on the bench now, and I'll start with the draw knife because I can take a lot more off at one time. And I'm really trying to round these over so that it's comfortable to sit on. And I'll do the same thing. I'll start at 45. When I have that to the depth I want, I'll go to 22. When it's pretty close to where I want it, I can come back with the spoke shave. So then it's a nice soft round edge and ready for sanding. So next I'll show you how I turn down the 5 parts that need turning. There's 3 legs, there's the foot pin, and then there's the clamp pin. For the legs, I turned it down to about a 2-inch cylinder and rounded the bottom of it. At the top, there's about 1 3/4 inch tenon where it's tapered down to 1.5 inches diameter, and then a smooth transition, and that's so that this can just sit up into the main platform of the bench. For the foot pin and the clamp pin, they're pretty similar. So for the clamp pin, I turn the whole thing down to about 1 1/4, and then from the center out, I measure 6 1/4 inches. And then on the end here, there's just a hard shoulder, and then it's turned down to 7/8 on each end. The same thing here, the foot pin, it's all turned down to 1.5 inch. This is 6 1/4 right in the center, hard shoulder, and then the rest on each end is turned down to 7/8. One last thing I'll do to the clamp pin is cut a 90-degree V notch into it right in the middle there. Okay, so there's the V. It doesn't go quite halfway through, so it's still quite thick here, but this will assist in clamping certain pieces of work. So all the parts are cut and shaped and sanded. Now there's just some holes to drill, a mortise to make, just so I can start fitting them together. I've kind of got them grouped into the parts that they are. So this is the main bench with the 3 legs. This is the treadle system, so the 2 side posts and the 2 pins. And then this is the actual work platform and the hinge piece that allows it to move up and down and attaches it to the main bench. So I'll go ahead and one by one kind of knock these out, get them fit together, and then the whole thing will come together. So I'll start by putting together the actual clamping or work surface board. First thing I need to do is put them on their side, and this small piece I'm going to round over both sides of one end. And then on this bigger board I'm going to round over just one corner. I'll start by cutting the bulk of the material off at the bandsaw. Then I'll finish rounding them over at the belt sander. Next, with the round over down and facing me, I need to cut a recess in this board so that this can sit inside of it. So I need to find center and then measure the width of this and then mark out just wider. because this will hinge here. So it needs to fit nice and snug, but loose enough to hinge easily. Then I'll come in the full width of the board. And just to make sure it hinges easily, I'll bring this like 1/8 of an inch more. So now I need to cut that out, and I'll come back to the bandsaw for this. So these parts fit together like this, and this is able to hinge. So now what I need to do is drill out through both of these and this so that I can run a bolt through it, or a dowel if you want to keep it all wood. On this one, I just need to mark off the hole here, so I'll find center this way and come that same distance down, and then put this right flush to the end here, mark that off, and then find center this way and then this way. So now I'll go drill these out. I'm going to be using a 10 mil drill for a 10 mil bolt. So I'll start with the small piece. I always like to center punch so the drill can't walk. And I always like to back up the board so that there's no tear out. So now I'll just test fit these together. Okay, and then this should pivot. Okay, so that fits great. I'm going to use a fender washer and a nylon lock nut to finish it off, but I'm not actually going to put the nut on yet because I'm probably going to need to take this apart before the final assembly. So for now, I'll just sit this aside. So the next thing I'll do is start working on the main bench. One of the things I need to do is add a mortise here into the end, because this part here drops down through the mortise, and that's how this mounts to the bench. It'll be a little bit wider than this so that I can put a wedge in. So I'll just drop that in and add the wedge, and it'll lock it in nice and tight. So I'll take this apart, then I can trace this out and cut that mortise. The first thing I want to do is start the mortise 1.5 inches off of the front here. So I'm just going to mark that. Make sure that checks out. Next, I need to mark center of this and this. So then I can line up the center marks, square this up, and now I'll just trace this out. Then on one side, I'm going to extend it about 3/16 of an inch. And that'll be my gap to drive in a wedge. Okay, so now I just need to chisel out this mortise. I'll come from both sides so that I don't blow it out coming through just one side. I always work above a table leg so I don't lose any energy into the bounce of the table, and I'll clamp the piece down just so that it doesn't bounce around or wobble while I'm working on it. And I'll go around all the edges about 1/16 in from the line, and then as I establish the mortise, I'll work my way out to the line. And first I'll sever all the long grain fibers. Once you get into it, you really start cruising and removing material pretty fast. So I'll just knock this out and come back. Okay, so the mortise is cut in. It's a nice snug fit so that this can just fit in, but it can easily slide up and down. And it's a bit too wide on one side here so that when I choose a height, I can wedge it in. So now, if I put this back together, so this can then fit in, and where it's wedged, I can then adjust the height that I want this platform to sit at. So next, I'll get the legs put into the bench. Now, to get the legs going, first thing I'll do is mark out the holes. So on the front leg here, I'm going to come in 11 inches off the front and then mark center across. And at the back here, to mark out the holes, I'm going to come in 4.5 inches off the back and 1 3/4 off the side. I'll do that on both sides. Okay, so this is set to 10 degrees. I want the back legs to be coming backwards 10 degrees and out 10 degrees. And the front leg will be going forward 10 degrees. So they're all splayed out away from each other. You could have the tenons on legs go all the way through the board and just flush cut them off on the top. But I think it'll look better if I don't go all the way through, so I'm just going to cut most of the way and stop just shy of going all the way through and then seat the leg tenon into that. I'm going to run the vacuum while I'm drilling so that I can keep the area and the hole nice and clean so I can tell how deep I'm going and be able to stop in time. So I've got an 1.5 inch paddle bit to match the 1.5 inch tenon here, my vacuum and angle finder ready to go, and I'm just going to drill these out. Okay, that should do it, and I'll knock out the rest. Okay, so here it is with the legs in. It's really starting to take shape. The work platform is installed, and so the next thing I'm going to do is work on the quoin, which sits under here to raise this, and you can move it back and forth to adjust it to whatever height you want it to be at. So the quoin's cured and ready to machine, so what I'll do is I'll just knock this off, and then I'm just going to shape it. I'm going to round the top over. I'll round this front bit. I'm just taking off any sharp corners and things like that. Probably leave the back. That should be fine. So I'll go ahead and get that cut on the bandsaw. Okay, and so now I'll go ahead and give this a sanding. So here's the quoin finished and shaped, and I should just mention that it doesn't really matter what the shape of this is. You just need it to be able to sit in, support the full width of the working board, and then there's an easy way to push and pull it in and out so that you can adjust the angle really quickly as you're working on the board. Sometimes there's a groove cut in the bench that a part of the quoin will sit into so that it can move forward and backwards but not shift side to side. It's just an optional thing to add. I don't personally find it necessary, but if you like the idea, then go ahead and add one. Basically, I just need a handle at the back that I can quickly grab, pull it in and out, and that works well enough for me. So now I'll start the layout for the treadle. And this is one place where it could vary a little bit. I'm 6 foot tall, and I've designed these measurements to be comfortable for me, and I've also made it adjustable in quite a few different ways. But it wouldn't hurt to get to this point in the project and then be able to hold the pieces in place and make sure that this geometry works for you. Both of these side pieces are 34 inches long. This is going to have the bottom about 1 inch off of the ground. Starting at the bottom, there's going to be a hole at 1.5 inches, 3 1/4, and 5. And these will be 7/8 so that the pins can fit through them. There'll be a hole at 19 inches, which is a bolt hole or a dowel if you want to use a dowel, and this will go through the bench. And so in my case, this will be a 12 mil hole because I'm using 12 mil bolts, but it could be 1/2 inch or it could be whatever bolt or dowel size you're going to use. And then all the way up for the clamp pin, there's going to be a hole at 26 3/4, 28 1/2, 30 1/4, and 32. And those again will be 7/8 holes because it'll take one of these pins. So I'll go ahead and mark both of these. And then with the speed square, I'll just mark halfway down the length. And that will give me my center of hole location. And these holes want to be drilled really straight because they need to slip onto both of these pins at the same time. And if they're cocked at all, then it won't want to slide together and make a square frame. So I'm going to take these to the drill press and get these drilled out. So I'll just finish up the rest now. And now I'll drill the 12mm holes. To mark out for the corresponding 12mm holes on the bench, I'm just going to measure from the front here, and I'm going to put 3, so again it's a bit adjustable. And there's one at 13 inches, one at 14.5 inches, and one at 16 inches. And then they'll be just halfway in between the thickness of the board. And I'll mark these out on both sides of the board and drill in halfway from each side. That way the treadle is definitely straight and perpendicular to the length of the board. Now all the main pieces are ready, so I'll go ahead and test fit everything together. First thing I'll do is take one of the treadle sides and just put a bolt or a threaded rod through it and insert that through the bench, and I'll just start on the middle hole. Then I'll take the foot pin, put it through one of the holes at the bottom, and the clamp pin through one of the holes at the top. Start with that. And then matching treadle piece, I'll just slide on. Okay, I'll just loosely fit the washer and nut on the other side. The work board can slide through, and the mount drop in, and then the quoin can slide in under. So slide a work piece through, and there it would clamp it nice and strong. So now there's a few holes I need to drill it. Now that it's all assembled, I need to put some holes in the pins so that I can drive a wedge through to hold the treadle system together. I'll put a hole here in the front that I can drive a pin into that will lock this down when I want it to be in the full down position. And then the last thing we'll do is get to the optional seat back. I need some wedges, so I'm just going to take them out of the spare block I set aside from one of the scraps, and with this I'm going to mark probably like 5/16, 2.5 inches long, and I'll cut that out, and once I do, that'll be 1 1/8 wide. I'll cut that down to. So that's one of the wedges, and then I just need a series of smaller wedges. So I'll cut the same size wedge. And from this, I'll be able to cut out multiple small wedges. So I'm just going to rip this wedge down into 5 pieces. So the wedge that's just 1 1/8 wide is meant to lock this mount into position. Because the workboard is actually a lever and this side is going to be pushing up when you're working, you'd actually want to wedge it from the bottom. Lock it in place. Then when you want to adjust it, you can just hit it down to release the wedge. So this means that when the workboard is all the way down, you don't actually want to use the wedge, because if you get it in there really tight, you can't actually hit it down to release the wedge. To secure this when it's all the way down, we're going to drill a hole in here, and I can just slide a dowel into that, and that will lock this down. So I'll measure to find the center of this board and use a 1/2 inch bit with a stop collar set to 2.5 inches. I'll just drill straight in, while this is firmly pushed down as the lowest position possible. Now I'll just lay down a piece of dowel 3.5 inches long, 1/2 inch diameter, that I can just insert in here, and that'll secure this down in the lowest position. I'll also take the dowel out of this piece of scrap, so I'll go ahead and cut a small piece out and go turn that down. If you preferred, you could also set this at several different heights, drill the hole through, and that way you could pin it in place at a few specific locations. The small wedges are roughly a 1/4 inch square at the top. So using a 1/4 inch bit, I'm going to drill 5 holes. One on each side of the 4 ends of the pins right next to the treadle arms. That'll lock everything in place. And then I'll do one straight down through here into this dowel so that it can't fall out while it's being used. So I'll go ahead and drill those in now. I'm just going to eyeball it. I'm going to go right next to the piece of wood, and I'm just going to try to go right through the center. So I'll spin the hole to be facing up and down and just drop one of the wedges through it. That'll just hold everything together. Now I'll go ahead and knock out the 3 others. And then the last one is this. I'll just center it front to back and side to side. Then just drop that wedge in. So that's it, a traditional English shave horse. The only things I've really changed are up here, the ability to raise and lower this, and then making it adjustable, adding extra holes everywhere so that it can really fit people of different sizes, different workpiece sizes. The next thing I'll do is add the seat back. This is not traditional, this is a modification of my own, and I've never seen it done before. So if you wanted to stick with a traditional one, you'd stop here, oil all the parts, and you're done. If you want to add the optional seat back, you'll need one additional piece of wood. So this is 23 inches long, 6 inches wide, and it's 2 inches thick. This is a pretty simple design, so I'll just go ahead and mark it out and get it cut. So this end's a bit more visually interesting, so I'm going to keep that. I'll come down to this end, mark out 5 inches from the end. So then I want to keep a tab here in the middle that's 1.5 inches wide. So I'll find the center. I'll mark 3/4 off each side. I'll do the same down here. And just connect those. And then I'll go and cut these out. Next, I'll come to the back of the bench and I'll cut out the notch that the seat fits into. So I'm going to cut a notch 8 inches long here, and it's going to be 1.5 inches wide. So first I'll find center and then measure 3/4 out from each side. I'll do the same down here. And I'll cut that out. So now I can take the seat back and slide it into this notch. And if the cuts are pretty accurate, then there shouldn't be very much wobble in this. Next, I've got this set to 15-degree lean back, or this is a 75-degree angle. And I'm just gonna tilt the seat back to rest right on that, and then clamp this in place. So that's the seat back in its angled position. As you see now, with it tipped back, all the pressure comes down on this one point in the back, and that'll really start gouging out the bench as you lean back and put weight on it. So what I'm going to do is take a 1/2 inch piece of ply, just hold it up on each side and draw it across. You could also just measure a 15-degree angle, but I like to do things in situation because it makes sure that the angle is actually correct and there isn't some theoretical mistake. So now I'll just go and cut these bottom pieces off, and the seat back will drop in and sit flush across the bottom. So I'll bring these lines across. So I'll go ahead and remove these parts. So I'll use a tenon saw for this cut. And then a pull saw just to remove it. So there you go, now it should sit flush. Next I need a piece of dowel that's 4.5 inches long and 3/4. So I'll just mark out one of these scraps, get it cut, and turn it down. With the seat back in position, I'm going to get a 3/4 inch paddle bit installed in the drill and have it perfectly vertical so that I can put it flush up against the underside of the bench, push it up against the tab sticking down, and that's how I can mark my hole. But before I actually mark the hole, I'm going to push the seat back forward just a little bit. This will give me a snugger fit when it's actually installed. So I just marked it out a little bit, but now it's ready to drill out fully. So now I can just take the seat back, insert the dowel, which I'll glue in later, but that's it. That's the whole thing, and it can just slide in, and you can easily adjust where you want the seat. So now I'll just take everything apart, give it a coat of oil, and reassemble it for the final time. Everything's now oiled and ready to go back together. I'll just mention the only thing I glue together is the seat back with the dowel. Everything else comes apart really easily, so you can store it away quite small, or you can reconfigure it however you need to. I'll go ahead and start putting the treadle together. So, and just put in the 2 clamp and foot pins and match the other piece. And now I'll just put on the nut. It's a nylon lock nut. And this will be nice and snug, but loose enough that it swings really easily. Next, I'll bolt the work platform to the mounting hinge piece. And this is also a nylon lock nut. Just drops in, and 1 dowel and pin. The quoin sits under, the seat back just slides in, and then I'll just go around and pin everything in place. And I'll just stick the wedge in here so it's there when I need it. All right, that's it all together. I'll go give it a try now. So to test it out, I'm just gonna use some scraps that I have lying around the workshop and this draw knife, which I made, and I'll link a video to this build. Because everything's adjustable here, it means I can accommodate a lot of different sized work pieces. So for example, if the clamp pin is too close to the workboard, even when it's all the way open, sometimes you can't rotate a piece because it's too thick. And so you'd have to drop the workboard down, but that changes the angle that the workpiece is working at. So I can adjust everything to make it fit the workpiece properly to make the work much more comfortable. The notch in the clamp pin is also really nice because I can just rotate the clamp pin to get the V-groove facing down, and I can put a square piece in and actually get it up on 45s and be able to just easily work the top angle. That can also help grab pieces that are already quite rounded. The seat back takes a lot of strain out of the work because as you're pushing forward, you're just pushing against here, which means it's more comfortable to work for a longer period of time at the shave horse. So overall, I really like the build. I think the modifications make it more versatile and more comfortable to use, and you could probably adapt some of the modifications to an existing shave horse you already have. So I'm just gonna keep playing with this for a while. So until next time, thanks for watching.